We are live in 5, 4, many words. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Patrick from the GarageBand Guide. Never know which way to point. And welcome to you. And in this video, what are we doing here, Patrick? We are talking about the Mac M1 for music production. And is it worth your buck, your quid, your dollary-do, whatever currency you have? Why don't we just jump straight into it? What we're going to do is we've got a bunch of topics. I'm going to throw them up here. We're going to put Patrick under the pump because he's been using this for a while now. What were your first impressions of the Mac M1 when you saw the announcement, when you saw that it was a thing? What did you think?
Yeah, I think I watched the announcement video, I think with maybe 1 or 2 or 6 beers. So I think I got progressively more excited the more they said. But the whole thing there, when they were talking about the system on a chip, and obviously there was a bit of a backlash with that announcement, wasn't there? Because their graphs were just nonsense. And it did seem like Apple have got a bit of a reputation for perhaps talking in marketing speak and it not kind of being a reality when you actually get your hands on something, all this fantastical new product and things. But then obviously once people started to get these machines, it actually became a bit more obvious that they actually are really quite incredibly powerful for what they are, which is entry-level machines.
Absolutely. And yeah, I was kind of the same that, and we'll talk about it as we go through each of these topics, but I looked at the specs and I looked at the fancy graphs and they're like 2 times more powerful than a thing. And I'm like, what thing? And then it's the graphs that had no numbers on them. And then when you paired that with, oh, and we've put massive 8 gigabytes of RAM. And I'm like, what is going to happen here? Like, this is insane. But yeah, and who knew that I would watch that and then walk away going, oh, that's interesting. And then a month later, I would have one sitting on my desk. So yeah, it's so my first impression was similar. I'm like, it's interesting, and it's a definitely a new way of doing things. But will it cut the mustard? I like that Michael here has cut to the chase. He's like, the too long didn't read answer. If you're using Logic or MainStage or both, yes, definitely. So there you go. All right, thanks guys. We'll see you next time. But yep. But and it's an interesting one because I guess it's going to be horses for courses, and we will go through all of our thoughts and views on this based on our experience, but then we will have time because we do have folks here live on Facebook and YouTube. So if you do have questions or if you do have your own feedback as we go through, you can throw that in the chat. And while I'm making Patrick do all the work, I'll keep an eye on that and answer any questions. As usual. Yeah, that's why I bring you on here. I don't have to do anything. I just sit back.
It's just a day off for you, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Spot on. So we talked about memory, and that's probably the one thing that everyone's jumped on. They're like, hang on, I've got a MacBook Pro beforehand that may have had 16 gig or 32 gig of memory, or maybe I'm running a PC with like an i7 or an i9 with 16 or 32. Why would I go to a system on a chip, integrated graphics, and only 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM? Patrick, why would we do this to ourselves?
I think just... Why, Pete, why? Well, I mean... For a bit of background for me, I came from a 2015, so it's a bit of an older machine, but a pretty good spec 27-inch iMac, an i7 processor, 32 gigabytes of RAM, SSD storage, all that good stuff. And it was certainly no slouch in its own right. It was a good iMac. Certainly could do pretty much anything I wanted it to. This entry-level 16 gigabyte Mac Mini that I've got absolutely smokes it, and I think it is just testament to the kind of engineering acumen that Apple have applied to it. The whole system of a chip thing, everything is so close together that the time it takes information to go from bit to bit is just so much less than it is in the kind of Intel architecture. And I think that's just the key thing. I mean, obviously, you've talked about it before, that this, in reality, this new kind of system of a chip isn't really a system on a chip, isn't exactly new. They've been doing it in iPads and iPhones for years, and it's just obviously they've now brought it over to the desktop ecosystem, as it were. And yeah. It does really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. You could, and that's the argument, I think, that you could call it the M1 or you could call it the A15 because it's basically the 15th iteration of their system on a chip they've been working with in iOS land for a really long time. Now, in terms of memory, you mentioned 16. So if you're not familiar, we both own the Mac Mini M1. You can, of course, get the MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro. They're quite similar in terms of the specs. They're all the 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, except for one of the Airs that only has 7 cores because Apple. But yeah, so your choice here, you went the 16 gigabytes, and did you beef up the storage a little bit, knowing that this is your like main studio machine?
Yeah, only to 512 gigabyte though. A lot of people, I think what a lot of people have done with the Mac Mini specifically is they've gone for the lowest amount of storage, and then they've just used external storage for the extra. Because Apple charge an arm and a leg for the storage, so it's an extra 200 quid to go from 256 to 512. And then if you want to go to a terabyte or 2 terabyte, you're going to be spending a small fortune. But because this was replacing my main computer, I kind of wanted something that would definitely last a few years at least, which is why I want to go for the extra memory.
Yeah, and whereas I went, this is my first Mac. I don't know if I will like it or use it for 2 weeks and then sell it. So I went the absolute base model, which was the 8 gigabytes and 256 of storage. And yeah, fair to say that I've been kind of blown away with what it's been able to do given the specs. And it's changed my perception of what specs actually mean and what having processors and memory means, because it's so different and such a different way of looking at things. So one of the other controversial things, I guess, or something that I was worried about and other people may be thinking about, is this ports. Are you stuck in dongle life now? What are you connected to? And are those 2 USB ports actually doing it for you? And is it enough to run your studio setup?
That dongle life. Well, yeah. So. Kind of. I'm in a cupboard, Pete. You know this. I'd have a very small, minimalist setup anyway. So they're kind of 2 USB-C ports and 2 USB ports. I mean, I can definitely get away with it. Have an audio interface that's plugged into one of the USB ports all the time. I do have a dongle. It's not an Apple dongle, but I do have a USB-C hub that's plugged in mainly for the SD card slot. So there's not an SD card slot built into the back of the Mac Minis, unfortunately. External hard drive into the other USB port, and then what's in the other USB-C port? I couldn't even tell you. What's in it? Display port. I have my monitor connected via that as well. So everything's definitely full. I think it might have been slightly better if Apple had used the kind of I/O selection from the Mac Mini, the next step up. So I believe you get 2 extra USB ports, and is it one extra USB-C?
I'm not sure if it's 4 and 2 or 4 and 3. Someone will be able to correct us in the chat.
Yeah, and
it's definitely the case. And for me, it's been, again, because I don't know why I like to connect so many things. I think for me, doing a lot of live streaming, I have the mixer as well as an audio interface, and that one extra device is kind of what made me go to the dongle. Plus, I'm running a 2-monitor setup here as well. So that's been the main reason, is that only one HDMI port, and if you want to run a second monitor, it has to come out of your USB-C. So and I just put a dongle in there because why not get? So my dongle has 3 additional USB-A ports as well as the HDMI, and that kind of covers it. But I know a lot of folks have used powered hubs and things. There's ways around it, but I guess it's a trade-off that you don't have everything nice and neat and tidy.
Absolutely.
But yeah, if you want everything plugged in at the same time and the flexibility, then that's what we go with. We've got some comments from folks here. Pagan Song says, heard the M1 actually only pulls 1/3 of the power compared to the PowerBook of this gen. Good news. And yeah, I didn't even have power on my list here, but definitely is a thing. And one thing with the power is that because it's so low powered, the fan, have you heard your fan come on? I haven't made my fan come on yet.
Only once, but only because I'm a complete idiot and nearly set my studio on fire. I have a plug-in electrical heater down here that the switches are they're kind of backwards on the side. So I had one switch on when I was doing something, then I thought I'd switched it off, when in fact I'd switched both bars on. And then we went out for a walk and then came back 2 hours later to find that like some of my lighting rig had fell down because it just melted off of the wall. And the fan on the Mac was going loudly. That's the only time I've ever heard it though. And it was quite hot in here. But in terms of actually pushing it performance-wise to make the fans come on, no. And on my old Intel iMac, they would come on, you'd switch it on, and they'd just spin up straight away. To load up Chrome or something, and they'd just... So, certainly apart from that one instance, I haven't heard the fan at all. Have you at all? Because obviously you're maybe pushing yours a bit more if you've got lots of things plugged in and stuff. Have you heard it or?
I really haven't, and I'm surprised because I've been streaming 1080p video whilst streaming my webcam, whilst running StreamYard and an audio interface and GarageBand and a mixer, and it just takes it in its stride, and haven't heard it come on. Then again, I haven't fan forced hot air onto it for a large period of time, so maybe that's the test that I need to do.
Maybe don't. I wouldn't advise it.
But it would be fun. It'd be interesting to find out. Got a question from Bear here. We will cover this. We'll talk GarageBand and Logic, of course, because that's our main areas of passion. So we will cover that in just a moment. But Tom says that the biggest mistake he made was only going the 256, and also got a 2 terabyte external though. Yeah. So, and I guess, and I think someone else, Michael, it might have been, said that if you're doing a lot of video editing, if you're editing a lot of 4K or 8K video, you are going to run out of storage space pretty quickly with 256. I do all my video editing on iOS, which is why I only went the 256. I think for audio, it's absolutely fine. I've got GarageBand, I've got a bunch of apps, a bunch of plugins on there, and I haven't even gone near it. Like 256 is actually a surprisingly large amount unless you're doing video, and that's probably my words on that. So Patrick says, not you, Patrick, other Patrick. I bought this product for music, small-time production. I only got 8 gigs of RAM, but I got the 1512. Is that adequate? I mean, in my experience, yeah, I think so. And we've seen it. I don't know if you've seen some of the videos of people putting it to the test. There was one famously that put used Logic and put about 128 instances of plugins on
1,000 instances of Space Design or something, wasn't it?
There it was, yeah. And that was the 8 gig 2256, the absolute base model, and it just went, yes, please, sir, I'd like some more. So I don't think you'll have any trouble. But yeah, obviously, if you want to completely future-proof yourself, you can go higher, but hey, the M2 will come out then, and then you'll feel bad because you'll be like, oh no, what am I going to do that? Another question from John here: any beach balls yet? So I will talk about it in a moment, John, because I have had some with a few things I've been doing. Patrick, have you seen our spinning friend, the beach ball, as yet?
I think maybe once or twice. I think when I first got it and was installing things on it, maybe, but certainly nothing kind of prolonged, no prolonged instance of the little beach ball of death. No, I can't say I have.
Yeah, mine's been mostly probably user error, just that I didn't know how to install apps. But we'll talk about that in a moment because it was not only a new Mac for me, it was my first Mac, which made it a little bit more challenging. Maury P, hello to you, says, by the time you add the cost of a screen, a mouse, and a keyboard, how much do you save compared to the MacBook Air? That's actually a really good question because the Mac Mini is $699 US, the starting price, or £699. I think you're the same in the UK as the US dollars. And the MacBook Air starts at $999. So I guess if you were adding, it depends on the screen you add. I mean, you can pick up a pretty decent 24-inch or 26-inch screen these days for like $150, $200 or pounds, probably even cheaper. And mouse and keyboard doesn't cost you much at all. So I think you're still going to come in under if you don't need the portability, if you don't need to pay for the keyboard and the screen. But what's your thoughts on that? Did you at all, because obviously yours was for your studio, did you have any thoughts of going the Pro or the Air?
Not really, no. I mean, if you're comparing it to the entry-level MacBook Air as well, that's $999. That's the one that doesn't make a massive difference, but that's the one with the 7-core GPU as opposed to the 8-core GPU that you'd get even in the base model Mac Mini. No, I mean, I kind of came to terms a long time ago that if I was going to do most of my main work at a desktop Mac, and then the whole point of having an iPad was that you could have that kind of computing power but portable, and I kind of made enough adjustments that any time I'm away from here I can do everything I need to do on my iPad anyway. That might not be the case for you obviously, but for my use case I was always going to go for the Mac Mini.
Yeah, and look, it was likewise for me. It was absolutely replacing my desktop, and that's what I went with. So for me, it's my live streaming rig, it's my desktop rig. It's when I sit down and I need to do solid work that I'm doing that. And like you say, I've got the iPad that I can, and the more with Big Sur, which we'll talk about in a moment, the more similarities there are now between iOS and desktop iOS, which is Big Sur, then the easier it is to make that transition. And I've definitely found that very simple, like easier, but also harder than I thought. So we'll get into all about that. Now, by the way, there's a bunch of videos down in the description. So this is going to be a sort of a buffet of information where we're just going to go through bits
Yum,
of
yum.
information. Right, delicious. But Patrick in particular has done 4 videos already about a bunch of things. And one of those things is audio interfaces. So why don't you take us through what to think about in terms of your audio interfaces, the compatibility, the gear, any issues? What should people be thinking about?
I mean, I tested quite a lot in my video, and the kind of conclusion I came to that is, as long as something's class compliant, you're not really going to have any issues, really. The kind of more top end stuff. So, for example, I have a Motu M2 that is a class compliant audio interface, 2 in 2 out. Works fine, apart from the loop back functionality still doesn't work yet. Motu are trying to come up with drivers for that, but their more expensive range of audio interfaces are still not compatible with M1 Macs at the moment. I believe they weren't when I did the video. But then kind of looking at other things, so even kind of cheapy little ones like this little horrible little thing.
You love
I hate it.
You went,
I'm like really throw it against the wall. That works fine as well. And everyone I tried, I had the M Audio N-Track Solo, worked absolutely fine. And both of my Focusrites, I've got a 2i4 and a 2i2 first gen up there as well. Plugged in, worked as normal. It was as if I was plugging it into my old iMac. There were no issues at all. On the other side of that, though, I only use audio interfaces. And I know certainly some people, yourself included, have had issues with mixers when they've came to try and connect them to their M1 Mac. I believe you had an issue with your mixer, right?
Will continue to have an issue. I've been using the Zoom LiveTrack L8 as my mixer for live streaming for over a year now, and with the PC works fine because Zoom have the drivers. With older Macs not running Big Sur, drivers works fine for folks using that, and there's even iOS compatible. But unfortunately, when M1 and the Big Sur update came out, Zoom still haven't quite got there, and we're 3 months and counting now, so we still don't have a driver for the M1s or for Big Sur for that particular device, which I don't know quite what that says, because you would think that a lot of people that are sort of in the prosumer market and using this sort of gear would be jumping over to the M1, or perhaps that's not the case, and maybe people that are using gear. And it's interesting what you said, that if it's class compliant and the simpler the device, the more likely it's going to actually work. If it's got those additional features and if it's got the additional stuff that requires processing and requires custom drivers, then it's potentially not going to work. But outside of that, though, my Samsung mixer, which I'm now using because I had to revert back to my older mixer, which I'm actually quite loving. Like, to be honest, having all the bells and whistles was nice, but I'm a simple dude, and going back to a simple mixer that's just all like 12 in, 2 out, I don't have to worry about all the different settings. It actually works fine. So that's been good. The Focusrite 2i2, as you mentioned, and I'm a big Steinberg fan too, so I've tried the UR22C and the UR44, and both of those worked. The UR44 has a CC mode, so that's probably the other thing to keep in mind. If you've got a higher-end device, some of them you can actually switch over into a class compliance mode, which means that they won't have all the bells and whistles or their DSP processing or anything like that, but they will then be able to work. So if you're having issues with something that has that CC switch, flick it over to class compliance mode and you should be good to go. So audio interfaces, bottom line is most of them work. And if you want to find out, you want to see Patrick testing them and putting them to the test, check the description below. Bluetooth. Now, there's been some chatter online, and when I say chatter, I mean everyone losing their absolute things about the Bluetooth connectivity on the new Mac M1. Have you had experiences with problems with Bluetooth connecting or disconnecting? And what's been your experience so far?
Absolutely fine. I should say I have like an Apple brand Magic keyboard and a Magic mouse, but I also have a Logitech Pebble, so like a little cheap 20 quid. So I use that for iOS, like tutorials and stuff like that. Pairs and works with no issues at all. I've heard a lot of people having issues with dropouts, so their Bluetooth stuff will connect and then within an hour it will just kind of randomly disconnect and then reconnect and stuff. I haven't experienced anything like that at all. I don't know if that's because it's Apple stuff that I'm using. I know a lot of people who are big fans of Logitech mice, so not the cheapo ones, the actual, is it the Master Mouse? Is that the one that's the fancy one with the little buttons? And a lot of people having issues with that model in particular with M1 Mac Minis. But apparently this Bluetooth issue isn't specific to M1 Mac Minis. Apparently the previous generation had issues with Bluetooth as well. So it might not just be the M1 chip's fault.
Yeah.
But it's still there, obviously.
Yeah, and apparently the latest update, which I think is 11.2, that's just been dropped, has got some bug fixes. We all know how much you love the bug fixes and performance improvements, because GarageBand's had so many of those in the last 3 years. Every time there's an update, it's bug fixes. But yeah, for me, I've been using. I mean, I haven't had any issues even on the previous version. So my AirPods Pro, which is far too expensive pair of earbuds that I slightly regret.
Wow.
And my I know. My daughter had. I said to my daughter, "I'm getting these. I didn't get them for the longest time because I thought people that wore them kind of looked like wankers, and so now that's her nickname for me." She's like, "Dad, you wearing those headphones again? You're such a..." Anyway. And then
Nice.
I've been using this one, the silent mouse, so the Logitech silent mouse, and this has worked fine as well. So I think it really is, it's kind of that low end versus higher end stuff. I think that the more fancy your gear is, whether it's Bluetooth or USB or otherwise, then the more problems you're likely to have, I guess, or the more things that can go wrong, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so.
Let's see. We've got Robert. So hello to you, Robert. Says no Bluetooth issues for me. M1 Mini 16 gigs. So yeah, and I think it's going to be that way. That you either will or you won't, and not your mileage may vary, and that's probably probably could have come in here and said, hey, should you buy one? Depends. You might love it. It might work with all your gear, or you might be one of these people that has a lot of problems. So we'll just try and give you as much information as we can. And hello to Biel Zibab. Very cool name, by the way. New Patreon member. Yes, I did notice that. So thank you, Biel Zibab, for supporting us on Patreon. Appreciate it. Next topic. So I talked about this. I'm going to talk about this because I have a mini rant on this. But displays or monitors, how have you gone? Someone asked before about connecting up to a monitor. What was your experience? Are you using multiple monitors? And have you had any sort of screen resolution display related issues?
It's just a single monitor, just because of what I'm used to. It's a 27-inch, it's a 4K LG monitor. As I say, I've got it connected via the display port, so that's out of the USB-C connection at the back of the Mac Mini and then into the display port in the back of the monitor. Haven't really had any issues apart from one niggling, annoying thing, where sometimes if the Mac goes to sleep and when I go to wake it, the screen will wake up in the wrong resolution. So it'll be zoomed into almost like what the scaled version of 1080p would look like. So then I have to switch the monitor off and then back on again, and then it's fixed. It doesn't happen all the time, but it is quite annoying when it does happen. But apart from that, I haven't had any issues at all, no.
So I've had a few issues.
I saw you had a video up. Yeah. That looked interesting.
Yeah. It was interesting. So, and it seems to change. So every month it's something different. And the fact that I'm persevering with it means that it's not the end of the world. But yeah, it's something to be aware of. So I've got two quite old HDMI Asus monitors, and I wanted to use them both because that's what I do with my PC, and I have multiple outputs on the PC. So I needed to use a USB-C dongle with an HDMI. I'm using the official Apple one. So I wanted to make sure it was all hunky-dory, and Apple couldn't say, oh, it's because you're using inferior third-party products. So I had the official Apple one, HDMI on one, the USB-C to HDMI on the other. And when I first started, every single time I turned on, it would reset all of the display settings. So it would flip the monitors around to the other way around, even though I'd set them, and it would change the refresh rate to be at 60 hertz instead of 50 hertz. So I would get a flickering mess until I went to the top and found the settings. So every single time I turned it on, and it was worse than that because every time it went to sleep, it's funny you mentioned that, I would wake it up and it would go blah, and it would just be the same problem with the two displays again. 11.1 fixed it. So I haven't had that issue since 11.1, but the issue I have now is your issue, where it will wake up, and sometimes it will just wake up and it won't even bring the screen on, and I have to legitimately go to the back and unplug the dongle, plug it back in before it recognizes that second screen. And I've tried switching the screens one to the other, and I've tried a different dongle, the non-Apple one, and it's still doing it. So it's a less big issue, but it's still an issue. So if you're using multiple screens, it's just something to be aware of. That I think there's still a few bugs in there, but I don't know the cause of this, and I don't know because it's pretty standard. I'm just running two 1080p monitors. They're very standard Asus 24 inches, so I don't really know what the problem is, but it's getting better. So if you're someone who gets frustrated by small things like that, that may be a wait. Maybe wait to 11.3 because they're clearly ironing out more and more bugs as we go along, and they'll probably get there eventually. So,
Eventually, yeah.
Eventually, by and by. By about version 12, we'll be fine. Now, we don't have webcams on our Macs because we use Mac Minis, obviously. But connecting up a webcam, we'll talk about in a moment. I just wanted to touch on, if you were considering the Air or the Pro, the thing to consider is that they have not updated those webcams at all. They are still the original 720p webcams that have been in those same machines for a long time now. Have you experienced those, or have you have any opinion or feedback on those webcams? Is that something that would completely put you off getting a laptop if you were going to be mobile?
Not really. I mean, I think depending on what you're going to do with it, I think if it was just for work or something, then it would be good enough for like a Zoom call or something. I think if you were going to, I don't know if you would ever use the built-in webcam on your Mac or any computer to kind of live stream on. I don't know if any kind of laptop computer comes with a webcam that's going to be better than an external one that you can plug in. It wouldn't really kind of bother me, no. But certainly, I mean, they could have updated them. I know there was a big thing on their announcement about how it's still the 720p, but we've updated the software.
Yep. Signal processing.
Great. Thanks for that.
Yeah. And it is weird because what's the camera in this? Like, this is a 4K camera in a 4-year-old iPhone. Like, this is not your newfangled iPhone 12. This is an iPhone XS, and this has a very nice 4K web camera in it. It's got, I think the front is 1080p. I'm pretty sure the front cam on this is 1080p. Yet, you've got your MacBook and then still sticking that same 720p.
Obviously had bits left over that they wanted to shove in these entry-level ones, and I'm sure the next ones that come along will have, well, I'm sure the next ones that come along.
Fingers crossed. John's saying that the webcam on his MacBook Air is rubbish. So there you go. And John also said, and this is a really good point, John. I did early on try switching out the cables, but that's probably the next step. Is I probably need to just go and buy 2 fresh, untainted HDMI cables and plug them in. Because I'm sure I don't contact Apple support, and Patrick and I have discussed this before because my own knowledge and the knowledge of my friends about Apple products is usually superior to that I'll get from Apple themselves. So I don't tend to go to Apple support, but I know if I did, they would say, have you tried using a different cable? Knowing true well that it had nothing to do with it. Right. Sorry, I did see another question there. It was from our friend Mark here. And this is, so talking about the webcam, so when I first connected my webcam, I did have some issues with the Logitech software back in version 11. As I mentioned, I think it was user error because I'd never installed a Mac app before, so an actual package where you download it and install it. So I think I did it all wrong. Patrick put me onto an app called Webcam Settings, which works really well with the Logitech webcams. I think you're using that right now.
Yes, still? Yeah. The kind of default settings for. I think I've maybe got the same webcam as you. Is it a C920 you've got?
922, so it's almost the same.
922.
Oh no, I just had to go too better.
But yeah, so I mean, if you don't do anything to these webcams, you look dreadful. I mean, I look dreadful anyway, but you look really dreadful. Whereas, that webcam settings app is really good. I think it wasn't free. I'm sure it was about £7 or something. But
it is.
Very good.
I think $7.99 US, and I think £7.99. It's $12.99 Australian. So it is an investment.
Right, okay.
But as you can see, it's very easy. I come in here whenever I start a show, and you can see like that. That's kind of what it will look like if I don't have anything on there, and that's what it does. But you can see you can dial in your brightness, your contrast, saturation, exposure time. So I think I'm too dark now. So now I'm not going to get don't play with your camera settings in the middle of a stream, Pete. That's the worst idea ever. But so that's what I would recommend and what I would go with, Mark, because that seems to give you the best control, even better than the Logitech software itself. But it is an investment, but worthwhile in my experience thus far. So so you can get around it. And I guess if you do have the MacBook with the crap camera, then grab yourself a Logitech 920 or 922 or the 930, and then you'll get stunning image quality like our friend Patrick there with his purple lights. We got what have we got? About another 5 topics to get through. I said to Patrick before the show, I'm like, we'll aim for half an hour here, but full well we're going to be here at least 45 minutes to an hour. Let's continue on. Talking about OS. So I've never used macOS before, or it's never been my daily driver. So for me, it's been a very different experience, and it's been something completely new. But for you, coming from Catalina, your favorite version and flavor of macOS, to Big Sur, what's been your experience and what's been happening with that so far?
I kind of feel like I'm in the minority, but I actually quite like it. I quite like the changes they made to the way it looks, the kind of iOSification of it. I don't mind that at all, really. I had some notes here. What did I think? What did I say about it? Yeah, so stuff like system-wide dark mode, I really like. I know that's just a very small thing, but the fact that you can just do it across your whole system just kind of stops my OCD from itching. One thing I think I have noticed as well, because I installed it on my old Intel Mac before, obviously, I got the M1 Mac, and it's definitely geared towards M1 chips and Apple's own chips. The difference in performance is quite striking between Big Sur or certainly on my old Intel Mac and on this M1 Mac. It's just a lot smoother, a lot snappier, and there was a few kind of just silly little hang-ups where on the Intel Mac where you would get kind of beach balls and stuff. There was a weird thing that happened after installing where for some reason GarageBand and Logic would scan my plugins every single time I'd open the program, which is infuriating because I'm a total hoarder of plugins. So it's scanning hundreds of plugins before every time I want to kind of actually open it and use it, which was really annoying. Apple support I did contact, had no idea. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, on the M1, it's just on the M1, it's just completely really smooth. Very much like a version of iOS, but on a larger scale in terms of silky smoothness, if that makes sense.
I think the correct term is buttery smooth. Patrick,
oh yeah.
Apple wanky style guide.
Yeah, on my daily driver, it is buttery smooth. Yes, there we go.
Yes, but I think the thing is, Apple have done a good thing, and I've said throughout my commentary on this, and for the 3 months that I've had it, I've said this a lot, and that is that they have found a way to make it compelling for someone like me, and someone like me was not their target demographic, or at least I was outside of their sort of realm of possibility when it came to it, because I was so ingrained. Like a 41-year-old who's been using PCs for 25 years is not someone that is going to easily be able to change. But what they did is they fed me into their ecosystem with iOS. They said, hey, you want to create music? Well, guess what? iOS is kind of the platform you need to use. So I learnt through iPad and learnt through iPhone. And then they said, if we could make a Mac that's actually kind of just like iOS, would you use it? And I said, yes, I will, Apple. Thank you. Where do I send my check? And here we are now, where it's probably no going back for me at this point because, and look, it's not fair. I know that there's been some folks here in the chat that have said, well, look, for $1,000, you could actually get a pretty specced out PC. And I don't debate or deny that for a second. And I don't begrudge anyone who wants to. It's like people that you probably get them, they come on and they're like, I've used Android and I'm perfectly happy. And I can't believe that Apple makes all this money and they make things so difficult. And I just say, cool. More power to you, but why are you here? I don't really understand the concept of you coming here to tell us that. Like, shouldn't you be off on your Android doing cool Android things? Like, live your life, dude. But yeah, or dudette, but let's be honest. Dude.
Not that you're better at all, Pete, yeah.
No, exactly. I'm looking down from my ivory tower and judging people, but no. But yeah, my experience, as I said, with Big Sur, as someone that's come into the Mac, because I've played with Macs. Like the time that I used the old Mac OS was when I'd walk into an Apple store because it was really bored or like 40 degrees Celsius outside, so I just want somewhere cool to play with stuff, and I would play with the Macs there, and I would have no idea. Like we're going back to the time where you have one mouse button, and I'm like, where's my right click? I don't understand. And where nothing was the same. Whereas now my biggest problem is I still go to the top right to close a window, and I still don't understand that I have to go to menu and hit quit application to actually get rid of it. Otherwise, it sits there in the background forever. So they're my two pet peeves, but with everything else, we're pretty good. Yeah, and as Robert says, have you figured out that minimizing an app is different from hiding an app? I have now, Robert. I'm learning, and I'm slow. Like people that watch my weekly shows know that I'll be like, now where did I put that browser? Oh, it's over here on my toolbar thing. How do I just get? Oh, I can't tab to it because I minimized instead of just put it behind. Help! But it's fun, and I'm learning. It's actually been good for the old brain because I'm learning things. Let's talk apps because Obviously, GarageBand is one of the apps that we have both been using. Have you put other apps to the test? And look, we'll bundle these together because obviously Logic Pro is something else we'll talk about. So feel free to jump between apps and talk Logic as well. I know people have been talking Logic in the chat, but what other apps have you thrown at your M1 as far as production goes, and how have they gone?
I held off. So I think I said to you the end of last year that I was hovering, my finger was hovering over the button. I'm definitely going to buy one. The main reason why I held off as long as I did is that the software I use to screen capture and edit my videos screen flow didn't work on M1 Mac. So not even through Rosetta 2, it didn't have like a Rosetta 2 version that would work. So I kind of like, unless I wanted to completely learn how to use a whole new video editing suite, which I didn't really fancy, to be honest, I had to wait until that was actually ready. Once it was and they released it, yeah, it works great. It's a proper Apple version, and the performance is much better. In terms of like 4K video and multiple streams of 4K video. Not that I really have a lot of 4K video, to be fair, but it deals with it no problem. Export times are massively improved over what they were on my Intel Mac. Talking about Logic, so in my, which video was it? I think it was my first impressions video. There's a Logic Pro benchmark that you can download. So it's a Logic Pro project that has, excuse me, hundreds of tracks with hundreds of software instrument tracks that have got effects on. And it's designed to see how many tracks you can actually activate before your computer dies and you get the beach ball of death and the system overload message. So as I said, like my old Intel Mac wasn't really a slouch, but I think it got like 42 tracks or something before it just wouldn't go any further. Whereas the M1 Mac Mini got to 91 tracks, I believe, before it started to kind of sputter and die. So looking at kind of, if you're thinking about Logic performance and whether or not it's quite, from what we've said before, 8 gigs or 16 gigs of RAM, or if you're kind of using Logic and having massive projects with lots of effects and things like that, you're probably quite rightly worried. But yeah, these things will definitely handle it. Pretty much any Apple native app now will work fantastically well on these machines. It's very much, you're getting a very much, to go back to iOS again, you're getting an iOS experience on Mac when it comes to the Apple native programs, in that they open instantly, they work really smoothly, and you won't really have a huge amount of issues. Do you know what I mean? Does that sound kind of similar to your experience, or?
Yeah, it totally has. And again, after those first few weeks where I didn't realize what I was doing and didn't realize that installing an app was slightly different, and you downloaded the package and then you ran the package and then that was different. So just getting used to the different way that you install a Mac app as opposed to a PC app. But once I got my head around that, which was pretty simple, then yeah, exactly the same experience, that once you were running an app, the load times were super quick. It would all just run well. Nothing was sort of held up, and I was actually blown away. Comparing something like OBS, so I use OBS to do a lot of, so you use ScreenFlow, I use OBS for kind of the same thing. Anytime I'm shooting video from my webcam or I need audio for a video, I just load up OBS because it does everything. It's video, it's screen capture, it's audio, and I used to use it on my PC, and I would get issues where the frame rate would drop off because it was using too much processing power, or trying to capture a screen, and you'd get like sort of trailing, or you get stuttering, and you get artifacts in the screen. None of that. So not a single bit of that on the M1. And again, I'm using, I've got half the amount of RAM. So when you think you go from 16 gig of RAM on an i5 Intel chip on a PC to 8 gig of RAM on a system on a chip with integrated graphics, you'd be thinking, hey, this is going to have to be really slow. It's the exact opposite. It's somehow much quicker. Even running right now, so I'm running StreamYard. I'm going to totally jinx myself, but I'm running StreamYard. I've got about 5 different applications open here. As I said, I'm running 2 different audio devices. I'm streaming 1080p webcam video. It's ingesting your webcam video as well, sending that out to the internet, and it's all just running buttery smooth. So I really can't complain when it comes to app performance. The Logic stuff, I haven't gone there yet. A lot of people have been saying, when are you going to try Logic? I'm like, I've still got about 70 GarageBand Guide videos to watch to understand how to use GarageBand on Mac. By the time I watch all these videos, I'll be pronouncing it GarageBand, I can assure you.
Good.
So,
that's the aim.
Correctly, sorry. But I need to actually learn that because I still don't know how to do automation of anything but volume or panning.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that GarageBand on Mac can do before I jump into Logic. And as you've mentioned, I think a few people mentioned here, MainStage is also like a nice sort of gateway drug between GarageBand and Logic. If you want a cheaper alternative than spending the $300 to go to Logic, then grabbing. Do you want to just explain that for a moment? What MainStage can do and what you get if you don't want to go the full upgrade?
Yeah, so if you are interested in the instruments, the presets, and the loops and sounds that come with Logic, but you're not interested in the extra features, then if you buy MainStage, which is I think it's £30 in the UK, I don't know what that translates to elsewhere, then you get all that in GarageBand. You get all of the sounds that are in Logic, all the instruments, all the presets, but it all loads into GarageBand. All three of those Apple programs share the same sound library. So yeah, it's a really cheap way to kind of supercharge GarageBand if you're not ready to kind of shell out for Logic yet.
Absolutely. Very cool. Bear has a question here. Says, and look, this will probably be our final point, so maybe hold this thought. So I want to purchase a Mac or a PC for music audio production. Mac Mini with M1 chip will do the job. Yeah, that's what we'll answer with our final topic. In fact, we're one away. So before we get to that final topic, you did a video recently that I thought was interesting where actually you did two videos. You did one about plugins, so effects plugins, and then you did one about instrument plugins.
Yes.
And you sort of showed your experience of using those and how that went. What's the good, bad, and ugly of using plugins on the M1?
The vast majority work. So if you're going to run so you have an option of running GarageBand in Intel mode, so it'll load the Intel version of GarageBand. You can do it with Logic as well, and then all your Intel-based plugins will just work as normal anyway. I didn't really want to do that because you're kind of sacrificing the excellent performance just to get functionality from a few plugins. And if you run GarageBand in Apple native mode, Rosetta 2 does a really good job, or there's a specific component that's part of Rosetta 2 that converts Intel plugins for use inside the Apple native version of GarageBand. So going through all of these plugins and instrument plugins that I have, as I said, I'm a bit of a hoarder, very surprising that the vast majority, so like 95% of them, just work. Notable exceptions, instrument plugin wise, is there's an issue at the minute with Spitfire Labs. Spitfire uses an external program that you can then install the sounds into Labs from, and there was some kind of issue between the two of them, so it didn't really work properly, which was a bit annoying. And then effects wise, there was some of the stuff from Baby Audio, which I really liked, didn't work. One of the good side effects of that is that a lot of Isotope plugins, so Isotope Ozone, or they have Neutron 2, their mixing plugin, they're assistant features, whereas you would load up the plugin, you'd press Master Assistant, for example, on the track you want to master, and it would automatically, based on the audio you're playing it, adjust settings to make the best possible master, or give you a good starting point to work from anyway. On my old Intel Mac and on other people's Intel Macs, that feature wouldn't work. And Isotope actually say on their website that those plugins aren't compatible with GarageBand for that reason. And now on M1 Macs, or certainly on my testing, everything works perfectly. So you're actually getting more functionality from those plugins than you did previously, which is absolutely bizarre, but obviously quite a good thing. So yeah, overall, really positive in terms of, I went into it thinking, a lot of these aren't going to work. I'm going to have to live without a lot of my favorite plugins, but and plugin manufacturers are really, some anyway, are being really quick in bringing out Apple native versions of their plugins. So Valhalla, who made one of my favorite plugins ever that's free, Valhalla Supermassive, they have an Apple version of that plugin and all of their free plugins that you can install and just use natively inside GarageBand and Logic. So nice. It's actually quite a good experience, surprisingly.
Good. Strange
for Apple, really. You expect things to go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, and it's promising, and it's because I've used GarageBand a couple of times, but not extensively, and haven't jumped into it too much. But and because all my plugins are iOS anyway, I don't own that many plugins, so it's good to know which ones I should and could, and the fact that I can pretty much use any, and they will work fine. So yeah, that is good news. And once again, if you want to check out the full videos from Patrick, links in the description below. Jump over to the GarageBand Guide and check those out. I've added one thing in here. I didn't tell Patrick about this, but I wanted to talk this because iOS apps. When I first got when the first M1 announcement came out, I was super excited because I thought, yay, we actually will get all of the iOS apps that I have on my iPad and my iPhone will now be available natively on my Mac. And when I'm doing demonstrations and tutorials, I won't have to mirror my iPad screen. It'll all just be there on my Mac screen. That didn't happen. Have you played with iOS apps much? Do you care about that feature or functionality? And do you think it's going to be a game changer in the future?
No. No, I think Apple have made it perfectly clear that they don't want it to be the feature that everybody thought it was going to be. I think everybody thought that they were going to throw open the gates to the walled garden and we could all just have apps on both platforms. Yeah, they're not doing that. Good news is that there are developers already who are creating iOS and Mac universal apps. You've got, so Jade introduced, our good friend Jade Starr introduced me to Bass Deluxe, and she just yesterday, I believe, had a video out from the same developer, which is Modern Deluxe Guitar Amp, which whether you buy it on Mac or iOS, you can then use it on either platform, which is really great. And I think I'm really looking forward to seeing more developers either porting their iOS apps over to Mac or more of these kind of universal apps coming along too.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant, and it will be good to see. I think that is the future. I think we thought it would be sort of taking the iOS apps and going backwards, but I think the challenges with that, so if you didn't know, Apple gave app developers the option to opt out of having their iOS apps work on M1, and everybody did. Surprisingly, they all went, yep, we don't want that, especially for, and we've talked about it before, but for app developers and plugin makers that have an iOS and a Mac version, so say an AUV3 and then an AU plugin, it's usually 3 or 4 times the cost for the Mac version because mobile got a discount because no one, it's from the old 99-cent App Store days. Everyone thought mobile means cheap, so they would get them. So, yeah, I think you're right. So LumaFusion is what I use for all of my video editing on iPad and iPhone, and they have worked really hard. They've got a really slick, smooth, runs well version. Well, it is just the version. They've made sure they've optimized their version for M1. So if you are a LumaFusion user on your iPad or iPhone and you want to just pull your projects across. I haven't done much on this, but I'll have to do a video on it soon. I'm doing too much editing to do a video about how I can do my editing differently. But when I do, I really need to put that to the test because that's going to help my workflow. If I'm doing those fiddly little editing parts, mobile works great for all of that. But sometimes there's nothing better than a mouse, a keyboard, and a big ass screen in front of you to actually get some of that stuff done. So I know that's sacrilege. I'm sorry, my mobile brothers and sisters. I know mobile is good and it is best for a lot of things, but even
Mac's better is what you're saying, Pete.
Yeah. Oh, we've gone there. We've gone there. Oh, all right. Not related to that, but I think we're done here, Patrick. I think we're going to finish up. Right, wind it up. All right, conclusion time. So we've talked about a lot of stuff, and I know everyone's just been asking in the chat and been saying the same thing, which is, do you buy an M1? You're a musician. Let's give it a scenario here. You're a music creator and you want to create music and you want the best possible platform for the next 5 years. Do you go right now and buy an M1 or do you wait for M1X, M2, whatever the next one is? And does it depend on what you're doing right now? Over to you, Patrick, for conclusion time.
I think it definitely does depend on what you're doing right now, but I think you could spend your life waiting for the next model to come out, and Apple kind of are very good at preying on people's lust for the latest and greatest thing, that you constantly churn out new kind of variations on pretty much the same thing. One thing to bear in mind with these is that the price to performance ratio is never going to be as good as it is with these entry-level models. Apple have came out themselves and said that they did not expect these M1 chips in these machines to perform as well as they did. They didn't mean to make them this good, which is, but they released them anyway, which is quite good. And then again, you would need to wait and see how much these next versions cost? How much more are Apple going to be charging you for how much more performance? And when are you going to hit that point of diminishing returns, especially if you're just getting started or are kind of a don't want to say a smaller creator, but on a smaller scale? Will you need to spend the extra hundreds or thousands of dollars on a machine that you will never get to the point where you're going to use that extra horsepower? That makes sense.
It does, and it's a really good point. And again, it's going to be horses for courses, and it's going to be where you're at now. And I think similar to when people said, "Do I buy a new iPhone or iPad?" It's really about looking at what you do now. Where are the gaps? Are you frustrated by the lack of performance of your current device? So the reason I bought a Mac M1, my PC was dying. I needed a new PC, and I thought, well, here's an opportunity to kill two birds, to try something new, and to see if the Mac infrastructure and the universe works for me, and also replace my aging streaming machine, which was not functioning that well. So for me, it made total sense. I think if you were running a 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5-year-old Mac or MacBook right now, maybe it's not the time. If you're running GarageBand, if Big Sur is working well for you, if everything is ticking along and you don't have any issues, I'm not sure that this is going to be the game changer that it would be for someone that's got a 10-year-old machine or doesn't have a Mac at all and it's their first experience. Would you agree with that sort of conclusion, or where do you think? Do you think even if you've got a 5-year-old, it's still worth?
Yeah, I'd say so. The performance, depending on the model, I would say, yeah. I mean, it's interesting now is that the second-hand market for Apple stuff is now going to be completely non-existent past this point. You can't. So I have always bought second-hand Macs. This is the first Mac I've ever bought new from Apple. I've always bought second-hand because that price to performance has always been a bit too expensive for me, and my wife would kill me and murder me and bury me in the in the back garden. But yeah, the performance increases is definitely tangible, I think, even from a Mac that's only kind of 5 years old. But that's a decision you need to make, and it'll depend what you need. As we've just said, it'll depend on your circumstances, whether or not you want to lay down, I mean, £700, £700, $699 for the entry-level one.
Yeah.
And then obviously, it's a tough one, Pete. It's a tough one.
Yeah. And look, it is. And I think folks like Joe here has got another way to go is, wait for the refurbished M1. Yeah. I think that's a really smart play, that if you're not in a super duper hurry, guess what? People are going to jump on the M2. Even people that bought the M1 on day one, if an M1X or an M2 or something comes out that's got 32 gig RAM option, or if it's got 4 ports instead of 2, people will just jump over onto it, and they'll be trading in their old M1s. So
a lot of people, just bought these just to have them. Because a lot of like multiple million subscriber influencers bought these just to have them because it's a new thing. And I think you're right, that's a very good point. When these new machines do come out, they're just going to get those, and then the first generation will be cut adrift, and you will probably be able to get a good deal on one of these machines once the next generation comes out, if that's a road you want to go down. That's a very good point.
Very good. We've got smart folks in the community here. When is the release date for M2? So Apple have said nothing. It's all speculation and rumor and innuendo right now. But if you follow some of the pundits like Rene Ritchie and the folks who are more in the know and in the pocket of Apple, then they're suggesting that sort of mid this year we'll get some sort of announcement, and we'll see a second version in some sort by either late 2021 or early 2022. So it's not soon. Definitely, if you want something, and again, it's that diminishing returns, that think about the value you'll get out of something. If you're going to put $1,000 down now, and it's going to help you produce your best music, and you're going to be twice as efficient because you're not going to be waiting around for spinning beach balls or connectivity issues, maybe that is worth it. That's the sort of thing that you need to stop and think about. And for me, the fact that I could do this interview today by just walking in, turning my Mac on, loading up Chrome, and then just pressing a button and Patrick appears, and then we stream for an hour in perfect quality, good audio, good video, like that to me, not having to wonder if my fan's going to start blowing and if my PC is going to reboot, or if Windows is going to blue screen on me halfway through a stream, that was absolutely worth it for me to do here. So that is going to pretty much do it. I'm just seeing, we've got people on the fence, absolutely, and it's a tough decision. It's something that we have to go through. Come on, Jerry. Get off the fence. But and Mark says he's not on the fence because his wife paid for it. There you go. So if you have a wife, just ask her to pay for it.
That's your solution, Jerry.
Exactly. It's a beautiful solution. I love it. Thank you for being here for everybody. As I mentioned, there are links down in the description to the complete. I've got a playlist of about 4 or 5 videos. Patrick's got 4 videos. They're labeled down below. You can check out the plugins and the gear, his first impressions, and yeah, that will be your homework is to go and check all of that out. And you mentioned our friend. It will be. There will be a test at the end, absolutely, of all those videos. You mentioned our friend Jade Starr in 10 minutes. Well, 5 minutes now. She's actually got Heimbach, who's another great YouTube music creating guru legend dude. He doesn't live in a cupboard like us and do everything in the box. He's got all the gear and all the stuff. So if you yearn for a time where everything was more out of the box, then yeah, you want to check out that interview. That's going to be a lot of fun. So jump over to that one there. Patrick, where can folks go to check out the wonderful work you do on the World Wide Web of Webs?
The GarageBand Guide would be the best place to start. Come over to the website. We've got plenty of tutorials on Mac stuff, iPad stuff, iPhone stuff. Yeah, come and have a gander and yeah, say hello.
Excellent, which I will be there. I will be there and be checking out all of this stuff because I need to learn GarageBand on Mac because I know my limitations and GarageBand on Mac is one of them. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all the folks who have been here live. If you're watching on the replay and you have any questions or feedback or anything, the comment section is open below. I'll be down there. Patrick will be down there after the show once the live show processes. So leave your comments and questions and anything that you have, your opinions. If you think we're totally wrong, that's 100% fine too. Because as we say, it's horses for courses, and you do you. Thanks for being here. As I say at the end of every show, please be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, keep creating music, and go buy an M1 or get your wife to. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.